These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. Well, I have a very special guest here today, somebody that I've been so excited to talk to. Welcome to the show, Marthe.
Thank you so much.
Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Oh, that's a big question. I'm just the ordinary Norwegian girl, I think. But my go-to hobby is ski expeditions. So whenever I have the possibility, I'll take my sled and go out and go for as long as I possibly can, really. Which have led me to some amazing places in the world.
I think when people hear ski expeditions, take their sled, go as far as they can, they might be thinking that you're like, just dragging a little piece of plastic sled out through a park, maybe going to a cabin, having a cup of coffee and coming back. You're understating expeditions a little bit, I think, because you skied to the South Pole.
Yes, I did.
That is incredible.
Yeah, it was an amazing journey. Antarctica, it's such a unique and pristine environment, and it's like being able to experience it, it was a gift, really.
Tell me the story.
So the Antarctic expedition was actually super random. So thing is, there's this New Zealand-based organization named Antarctic Heritage Trust. Their mission is to take care of and conserve all the huts in Antarctica and maintain history. And they have this initiative called Inspiring Explorers, because they believe that if young people don't know about the history and don't care for the history and environment, they will not take care of it. So every year they take young people out of an expedition on a trip. And in 2022, it was 150 years since the Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen was born. He was the first one to reach the South Pole. And, that is a really good excuse to make an Antarctic expedition in celebration of his birthday. And they realized that, we need a Norwegian alibi going into this. So they said that, we'll take 2 Kiwis and 1 Norwegian to the South Pole. They'll form an expedition. So I was just randomly scrolling our newspaper, and I saw this article that explorers was wanted. So I was like, I gotta check this out. And I spent I hid away for an entire day and wrote my resume and my application. I looked over it, thought, this is pretty stuffed. It's so dry, it's not funny at all. And then I thought, I gotta be a bit more honest about who I am. So I spent an entire paragraph writing how great I am at building outdoor toilets in the snow and stuff like that. And surprisingly, they called me in for an interview. And I went through all the rounds, and I got selected for that expedition. So, and I will forever be grateful for that, because they did an amazing job putting together a team. So we clicked right away. And yeah.
How do you build a toilet in the snow?
Depends on the snow, really, and the weather. There's so many different types of snow.
Yeah, a slushy snow is going to be a real problem.
Yes, you'll slide into the toilet. And it's not a place where you want your feet to be. But usually in these kind of areas, the snow is so packed because of the wind, so it's quite hard. So then you just make a long ditch and you make a platform where you can have your feet. And if you do it really nice, you can build a wall for the wind and stuff like that. You can't really be shy when you go to the loo in flat places. So
I remember from reading Endurance that after their ship had become beset in the ice and they were stuck there and they were waiting for the ice to break up and potentially release their ship, which never happened, they'd kind of run out of a lot of their food and were subsisting primarily on penguins and seal meat and stuff like that. And the bathroom experience wasn't very great, and they had run out of toilet paper as well, so they were having to use pieces of ice for toilet paper. And I think a lot of people sort of gloss over pieces of a story like that. They're like, "Oh, that must suck." But if you've actually lived in these austere environments, the things that become really difficult that are daily tasks, they can really wear you down and become a big problem. So if you're willing to write about something like that on a resume, says, "Oh, like this might be somebody who can really be a force multiplier on this trip. Like, we want to have her on this expedition so that we can have a good toilet experience while we're in Antarctica." That's hilarious to me.
yeah, in Antarctica, the worst thing about going to the loos is the wind.
Mm,
And half of a cold injuries happen trying to do your business in the wind
yeah,
outside because that's ruthless. But other than that, it's quite nice. You get used to the snow
yeah,
using that as toilet paper.
yeah,
Sometimes it's actually quite nice because you get
yeah,
a little bit of washing.
mm,
So on day 40, you appreciate that snow. But
yeah. So
yeah.
where would you have started on this expedition?
In Antarctica, we did the Messner route.
Okay.
So everybody that comes into Antarctica during the season, we usually fly from Punta Arenas in Chile, and then you fly over to like a temporary camp that goes up every year. It's called Union Glacier. It's Antarctic Logistics that runs it, and from there we got flown out to the ice where the Messner start is, and then we skied to the South Pole. That's
Now, I think a lot of people think of Antarctica as like this big flat ice sheet, but there's actually really significant mountain ranges.
yes. You have, I think it's the Ellesmere Mountains we saw, and they're proper alpine. They're so beautiful. When you fly out from Union Glacier, you get to look down on them, and they're like just mind blowing. And also, like Antarctica, it's on that's an island, and you have the glacier on top of it that builds quite a lot. So it's not a flat trip. We started on the sea ice, and then we walked up to the South Pole. And the South Pole is at, I think, 2,300 meters or something. But due to the atmospherical pressure, or I don't know the science behind this, it is equivalent to almost 4,000 meters in the equator. So you see, especially people that fly in and do just the last degree, they often struggle with symptoms of altitude.
Interesting.
So it's quite a big uphill. It's a really long uphill skiing to the South Pole.
So what are you actually pulling behind you in your sledge?
In the sleds, we have everything we need. We have our food, we have our fuel, our tents, our sleeping bags, communications, books. So everything you need for those 50 days, you have to pull with you.
What was the biggest luxury item?
Ooh, coffee?
Coffee's a luxury? Oh, I'd turn
Nah,
around.
you're right. It's a necessity. Biggest luxury item. Hmm, it's a good question. Um, books, the iPod,
Yeah.
those are luxuries.
How do you manage batteries in cold conditions like that? And how cold did it get?
Effectively, like with the wind chill and everything, I think we were in just above minus 50 degrees Celsius when we were up at the plateau. But we did have like the entire range from 0 degrees to minus 50. I have no idea what that's in Fahrenheit. So
I think it's around minus 60, but I'm going to find out right now while you keep talking.
Yeah. So you get kind of used to it. The nice thing about Antarctica is that there's like one sun up and one sun down for the entire year. So whenever the sun is up, and especially if you're in the tent, it can get quite warm because of the radiation for the sun. It's really, really strong down there. So in the tent, we could have plus degrees. And then managing batteries wasn't an issue. During the colder days, and especially when we reached that like top plateau going into the South Pole, batteries died quickly. So you needed to have them like on your inside pocket or like heat them in your neck between the buff and your skin, and just try to keep them warm. But in Antarctica, I didn't have much issues with batteries.
What about condensation inside your tents? Like some of the times that I've gone out, like snowmobiled out, skied out, and spent the night out in tents, the condensation inside those tent walls is crazy. It builds up so much ice. Every time the wind blows, the ice falls on your face. I felt like I was doing something wrong. How do you mitigate that?
So in Antarctica, that's not an issue, actually. That was one of my like biggest fears. So in the Arctic, condensation during the cold months, that is a big issue. That's one of the things you need to be really vigilant tackling. So I have a snow brush. I brought it with me to Antarctica, and I was like brushing everything free from snow before taking it into the tent. And I was like, it took me a couple of days to realize, the roof of the tent doesn't freeze. My breath doesn't turn into condensation here, and that's because of the radiation from the sun. In the Arctic, like when we did Northwest Passage last year, that was really cold, and condensation was a big, big issue. Like your goggles would freeze, your glasses would freeze. You'd have like a starry sky on your tent roof every day, and like when you went to sleep and you woke up, you would have like snow falling from the opening of the sleeping bag into your neck and melting, and that's just crazy cold because it's dark. Everything turns into moisture, like your breath, your cooking. So you just try to be really vigilant about ventilation in the tent. Ventilation is key. You will still get the moisture though, just a little bit less. Also, try to like brush off all snow before you get into the tent, so you minimize condensation from that. But yeah, the colder it is, the more condensation you will have, and that's one of the more unpleasant things about doing winter expeditions.
Was it summertime in Antarctica?
Yes.
Okay.
You only do expeditions there during Antarctic summer.
So it's light all the time? Is it light all the time?
Yeah. One sun up, one sun down.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you, when you went to sleep at night, or whenever you stopped, I guess, because there is no night, were you just so tired that you just go to sleep, or did you have to do something to keep the light out of your eyes?
Oh, you definitely needed to have a good sleeping mask blocking out the light. I had underestimated the light because I didn't expect it to be that intense. So I struggled a lot with sleep in Antarctica. So usually I sleep like a baby on expeditions. Down there, I was lucky if I got 6 hours. when I went down, I was, you hear all the stories about how cold it is, how ruthless it is, and it is. Once you're outside of the tent, Antarctica can be ruthless because you have the winds. But inside the tent, like if you have the sunny side and the weather is nice, like I never in a million years expected that I would lie in my undies on top of my sleeping bag and just be like, it's too warm. I'm sweating. I can't sleep. So that was something I did not expect going into it. And I would definitely change my approach if I was to do it again in regards of the sun.
So that temperature though that you might be lying in your underwear on top of your sleeping bag, would that be like 0 degrees Celsius, 10 degrees Celsius?
Oh, that would vary a bit. And it also depended on which side of the tent, because you could have like 20 degrees difference from the two sides. So the side that had the sun was the warmer side, and it could be like maybe plus 15, I don't know.
Okay.
While the other side would be minus 15. So it's the radiation from the sun.
Because one of the things that I've always found so interesting is if you expose yourself to significant cold for a small amount of time, even if maybe you're only spending half an hour a day out in it, and then the rest of your time is inside in a climate controlled environment, and then say it heats up, like if it was minus 20 Fahrenheit here for a week, and I'm only spending half an hour a day out in it. The rest of the time I'm in a 67-degree house, and then it heats up to 30 degrees. I can, or 0 Celsius, I can go outside and work in a t-shirt and be completely comfortable. So the way our bodies adapt to cold is fascinating to me. And for me, it doesn't seem to happen the same way in the heat. Like if it's 40 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, I just never get used to it. I'm always hot, It's wild.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons, like on cold weather expeditions, usually the first 4 to 6 days are the hardest regardless, because you're setting in the routines and you're acclimatizing to the environment you're in. But after like day 6, it's usually good. But so if you get over that threshold, you're able to thrive and have a good trip.
What was the low point of the trip? Was there ever a moment where you thought, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it?
Not in a physical sense like that, no. I've never had that kind of moment, and I'm still looking for it. But my story, the decision to actually go to Antarctica, that is the hardest decision I've ever made in my life. That was a proper dilemma for me. A little bit of backstory. My mom got diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 3 or 4 years before the Antarctic expedition. So me and my younger sister were the closest family and the main caretakers. A week and a half before our departure, she had a stroke, which is, when you have Alzheimer's disease, you get a lot of like additional health issues usually. And we went so many rounds with the doctors. And she was quite young, and it tends to move faster when you're young for some reason. And they were like, we can't really give you an estimate. Like she could have 1 month left, or she could have 6 months left. We don't know. It's impossible to predict. So I spent like every waking moment until I really needed to go with her and trying to decide, should I go and have the adventure and live life while I still got it? Or should I stay at home just in case something bad happens? thankfully, I have a really supportive family. They would not let me stay home. But I needed to find my peace with it as well. And we already know that I ended up going. And that's both a blessing and a curse. So when we were halfway, like actually at the halfway mark to the South Pole, I got a message in the morning on the satellite phone saying that I should call home. And then they had gathered the family, and her condition was declining rapidly. And we were at the point where it could have been possible for me to go home, but doing the math, given her condition, I would never have made it home in time. Like, there was just no way, because you're at the most remote place on Earth, and it would, like, if the weather was with me, it would take me a week to get back. And we realized that she didn't have a week. So then I decided to stay and complete the expedition and stay with the team. And Antarctic Heritage Trust let me use like an insane amount of satellite phone minutes, which I'm really grateful for. So every morning and every night I would call home. I get to be on the phone with the family and my mom. She couldn't speak at the time. And she passed 3 days later while I was at the ice. And I say it's a blessing and a curse, because we had reached the point where we had no means of digital distractions. Like Spotify didn't work, Netflix didn't work. Like we had nothing. So for 12 hours a day, you got to ski in this really beautiful environment with only your head as entertainment. And also what happens when you've been out for that long is that your imagination, like it's like switching your brain from black and white television to Technicolor. It's a completely different experience. So what that allowed me to do was to like really process the entire situation in peace, which is a gift so few of us get to experience. Like my little sister, when she had to be home and deal with everything, like what should we do with the body? How should we plan the funeral? All of those things. And she also had to like put up, how you put up a front when you meet people, and also like how people meet you when they know you lost someone. And she had to deal with that. And like, I feel bad about it whenever I think about it, because she had to deal with it. And I got to be in my own head and process the entire thing alone, which is something you feel guilty about afterwards, if you're honest. But I think I would have made the same choice again. And I think for me, it was the right choice to make. But that was the hardest thing about the expedition for me. Yeah.
What do you think your mom would have told you if she could talk?
I think she would have told me to go.
For sure. 100% she would have told you to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible. And beautiful and tragic in all the ways. Like what a situation to be in. And how awesome is it that your family was so supportive, and that your sister was there. And I mean, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah, she's amazing.
At that point, there is no force on Earth that can keep you from reaching the South Pole, right? Like, you are going to get there if you have to do it with your fingernails.
Yeah. Physically, I have found the entire experience all right.
Yeah.
So it's just the mental part, like, and that's the thing. When you go into those situations, you never know how your head will play out. Like, I could have had a proper meltdown. I had no way of knowing that before going into the situation. But my head treated me all right, and I had amazing teammates who took care of me in their own way, and it was a strong bonding experience because you could see, like, we were 5 people with 5 completely different way of dealing with loss. So it was a strong bonding experience.
How many days did it take to get there?
50.
50 exactly. And is that
Yeah.
normal?
Yeah, sort of normal, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
How many miles a day or kilometers a day were you doing?
that would depend greatly on the day.
Okay.
So usually you start out with smaller days and kind of like work your body up to it. So you start really mild. If not, you're going to get injured or burn all your energy. So we started with light days and we kept building on them. So we would add an hour, or we would add 10 minutes to every stretch. But for the most part, like, maybe average around 20 kilometers.
Okay.
It also really depended on the weather because we had a lot of whiteout.
Yeah.
And in Antarctica, you have these sastrugis, which are wind-blown snow, and they're hard as concrete, and they can get so tall. It's like skiing in an ocean that's frozen in the middle of a hurricane, and you need to like navigate that and take care of your skis and your sleds, and stuff keep tipping if you don't hit them correctly, and if it's white out, you can't see. So then you're in for a lot of surprises when skiing.
What kind of skis did you use?
We use, I'm not sure how they translate to English, to be honest.
Sida på norsk.
Fjellski,
Okay.
backcountry skis.
Yeah, backcountry skis, mountain skis. Yeah, mountaineering skis. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've got a metal edge.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're like slightly fat cross-country skis, a little bit more robust.
Yeah. And then you can lock the heels down if you want.
No,
you can't.
No.
Okay, gotcha.
So they're like cross-country skis with a tippy heel, but just a bit more robust.
And did they have fish scales on the bottom, or were you using wax? I know Norwegians love wax.
Yeah, no, we used skins.
You use skins. Okay.
Yeah. And the snow in Antarctica, it's like skiing on the beach. Like, it's so windblown, like you have next to no glide whatsoever. It's horrible skiing conditions, to be honest.
It was such a shock to me when I moved to Norway, because I got there in the summertime, and then as soon as the snow hit, all of a sudden life is about skis, right? And where here we would have like bike racks, or where I live, there's, hitching posts to tie up horses sometimes.
Wow.
But there it's ski racks, right? People ski everywhere. They ski to school, they ski to the grocery store, and they love to ski uphill. Like that's the national hobby, is to ski uphill. And it was crazy to me. I was like, why don't you just take a chairlift up there and then ski down? Like, that's so much better. Why are we just fighting gravity for the fun of it? But after a winter there, I was into it. It was awesome. And I continued to cross country ski and hunt and travel on skis to this day. I love it so much. I use like 150 centimeters, super fat skis with permanent skins on them, like an Altai style ski. And yeah, it's absolutely lovely to experience these winter environments because for me, it feels brand new. And I know I'm not the first person to be there. It's not even the first time I've been there, but it looks brand new. So you always feel like that pioneer, like that explorer. And oftentimes it's such a still and peaceful world. Other times, like what you're describing, it can be so chaotic and violent and disorienting, but it's always special. And Norwegians, of course, are the best cross-country skiers in the world. We see that in the Olympics over and over again. And you're wonderful biathletes and just tremendous athletes in general. So it's not surprising to me to hear from you that doing something that for almost everyone listening is incomprehensibly difficult, like skiing to the center of a continent, as austere and hostile as Antarctica. You're saying, physically not that big of a deal, where you're doing 12 plus miles a day. That's not normal. I don't know if you know that or not. Like, you're calling yourself a normal Norwegian girl, but that's not normal for the rest of the world. Like, that would kill almost everyone in the world. But for you, it's just a Tuesday. That's impressive.
Well, I would say everything depends. So we went slowly, which is why it was so okay for us. If you try for speed record or if you go faster, you will like multiply how hard it is a lot. And you had Laura and Mike, the Kiwis. They had never skied in their life.
Wow.
So for them, it was the first time. And of course, I had an advantage because I had done it before and I had the balance. They needed to work a little bit more on just like keeping on their feet. But they did it so perfectly. They aced it. Like, I'm so impressed by how they tackled the entire thing, and they come from a tropical island.
Yeah,
So
but they're crazy people. Kiwis. They're like the Finns of the South, right? They're nuts. Yeah,
yeah, they're
for sure.
super nuts.
In
But
the best of ways. Yeah.
yeah, I love them to bits. And actually, I didn't cross country ski until I was an adult. So I'm not one of those who grew up like racing cross country skis. I grew up in the hills, very few flat areas. So I'm used to giant slalom and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. How old were you when you made it to the South Pole?
I turned 31 on the way.
Okay.
I had my
Yeah.
birthday out there as well.
Nice. That's fun.
Yeah, I brought cheesecake.
You brought cheesecake. Awesome.
So if you know how to melt cheesecake in the Arctic, you can have a hell of a feast in the tent.
Oh, that's hilarious. So how did this expedition compare to some of the other ones you've done, like the Northwest Passage, Greenland?
So if you look at photos of the places, they might look exactly the same.
It's a lot of white. Yeah, it's a lot of snow. Yeah.
Yeah, white and horizons, not much of vegetation going on. But once you're in the environment, you kind of understand they're so profoundly different from each other. Like, they have their own personalities and traits. And they change in an instant. So Antarctica is, it's big, it's so pure. There's nothing else there, it's so pure. And you get a little bit of everything, but it's also really, really dry, which was new to me. I've never been in a desert before. Antarctica is a desert. And you have Greenland, where you basically cross a glacier. So going up, you'll have to navigate up on the glacier. It's a lot of terrain. It's a lot of ice. where,
Crevasses.
yeah, that's a big thing of it. That's also a thing in Antarctica.
Hmm.
There was a lot of crevasses, and those are big. So we try to avoid those. And on Greenland, you'll have this like wet snow in the wind constantly that will freeze on your clothes. Whenever you walk up a glacier, you always have the wind in your face because the wind will fall down from the glacier. And then you reach the plateau and everything is nice. And then you try to go down again, and then you have the entire thing in reverse. Northwest Passage is cold. The Northwest Passage is the coldest place I've ever been. And that cold is ruthless. It's moist. It kind of just like bites through your clothes. It's dark. You have wildlife you need to worry about. In the Northwest Passage, there is a lot of polar bears and
Yeah,
mox oxes and
I
polar foxes.
I saw one video where you were in this jumbled up ice field and you were going to sleep next to what looked like a Mosin Nagant rifle
Yeah.
um, that was already old in World War II. Uh,
Yeah.
that
It
would
works
not be
though.
that would not be like my go-to if I had a legit chance of a polar bear waking me up. And it as it turns out, you had polar bear tracks not far from your tent when you woke up in the morning.
Yeah, so I think the post you're referring to, that was like we borrowed a polar dog from one of the locals, so we would have like an outside alert system
Mm-hmm.
for polar bears. Dogs are amazing at detecting stuff you can't see. Um, but that day we needed to pitch camp in a really messy area, and the more uh, of those pressure ridges there are, the more likely there are polar bears because that's their hunting ground.
Sure.
And I remember, like, I was going to bed. My friend had already gone to sleep, and I was like, I felt uneasy because we were so close to all the rubble. Sorry. And usually you would try to like find a quiet lead where you would have some distance so you could spot stuff from a distance. But we did not have that day, and I didn't hear anything through the night. I made very sure my rifle was close to me that night and everything was functional. I aimed it at the front door of the tent for some reason, as if a polar bear would have the common courtesy of entering normal way. So, but that's just like, that's how your mind works sometimes. But when we woke up the next morning and we started skiing, I think it was like 200 or 300 meters away, just like over the pressure ridge we were close to, we saw fresh tracks of a mama bear and her cub. So they had been around during the night.
They just
And
didn't like the way you smelled.
probably not.
Yeah.
We didn't smell great.
So that is a question. How do you manage something like hygiene while you're out there in this environment? Like, how are you keeping yourself clean?
You really pray that those who claim that the body is self-cleansing in a way, that they're correct. But if the temperature allows, you can melt the wet wipe and wash yourself down a little bit. I usually try to keep my hands quite clean, and you use a sanitizer whenever you've been to the toilet and those kind of things. But some days you have a wet wipe and you just get to rub your face, and that's a luxury. And for the girls, it's also like trying to get a routine of brushing your hair, because like if that gets to live its own life, you'll come home with dreadlocks you'll never get out. Also, it can be quite itchy because like it kind of just builds up with loose hair. So you really, really want to try to brush it through whenever you can. But
Yeah.
doing hygiene in cold environments, it's rarely tempting because it would require to get undressed and get something cold and moist on your body.
Right.
And that's not tempting at all.
Something that I've found when I take longer trips is that coming back is actually quite a bit harder. That reentry into normal life, into being around your family, being around electronics, even something like going to a grocery store can be really overwhelming. Have you experienced anything like that?
Yes, definitely. So I tend to call it post-expedition depression. So when like the novelty of everything that you suddenly have in the modern society, when that wears off, you're kind of left with this sadness and this emptiness, and things feel kind of not meaningful because it's so like life feels so blunt and muted in comparison to what you had when you were outside and just like in flow with the elements. And I experienced it quite hard after Antarctica. And what hit me is that I I was in the army for 10 years before I started doing this. And it for me, it's quite similar to the feeling when you get home from a deployment, because suddenly you have no structure, you don't have that set purpose for every day, and everything just feels like irrelevant to you. So if you have any idea how to handle those emotions, please tell me, because I get it every time I get home.
I struggle with it too, and I was in the Marine Corps as well, so I know exactly where you're coming from. Yeah, it's really tough. It's also really hard to have compassion for people who think that the problem that they're dealing with is a big problem,
Yes.
when you feel like compared to the problems you've just been dealing with, like it's almost impossible to even consider that to be a problem. But for them, it's huge, right? It's disrupting their entire life, and you still need to have compassion for them because that's sort of what's expected. But what you're actually feeling is like, that's not a problem. You need to just like deal with that and move on with your life. That's something that I for sure struggle with to this day. To this day.
Yeah. I especially remember that after being deployed,
Yeah.
getting home and people like fussing over like mundane stuff and the newest phone, and it just felt like so stupid to me.
Yeah. 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 Like you see somebody order a meal and they're like, "Oh, I didn't want pickles." Like,
Yeah.
like that's the worst thing that's going on in your life. You're upset because you got extra food. Like, what is going on? Yeah. Pretty wild. What was your job in the Army?
I did a lot of things.
Yeah.
The Norwegian Army is a little bit different than the US Army in that way. And my Army experience was a series of random events. So I got a lot of cool opportunities, and I never said no.
Yeah.
So I got to do a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. That's fun. Is military service still compulsory for young men in Norway?
And women.
Yeah, and women. So
Yes.
everyone goes into the military.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in 2016, I think we turned it compulsory for both genders.
Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah. So I was there in 2002, 2003, and I thought it was fascinating that everybody that I was in videregående with was going to go into the military. All the guys were going to go into the military, and that was my plan as well. It turned out I didn't go until after college, but I thought it was fascinating that the country had decided that it's important for everyone who's capable of it to serve their country for a time. I think that it's awesome. I would like to see more countries do that. How do you feel like that changed the way you feel about Norway?
The compulsory military service.
Yeah.
Wow. I think it's a good thing. Because you learn a lot and you grow as a person, and you go in like in the end of your teenage years, and all like up until that point most people have just like been worried about themselves, and and then you go in and you learn teamwork, you learn taking care of others, and you're also introduced to that there is bigger problems in the world than those you've been dealing with this far.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's good. I went in before it was mandatory for girls, so I went voluntarily. I don't regret it, but I wouldn't go back either. So
yeah. Well, thank you very much for your service to your country.
Likewise.
Norway has been an ally to the United States for a long time, and there's such cool stories of military service, especially from World War II. Like there are some absolutely incredible individual acts of valor from Norwegians during World War II. My granddad actually fought in Norway in World War II and was wounded there. He was wounded twice during his military service, which evidently runs in the family. And so at some point he got hit by a German grenade in Norway. And I don't know too much about the story, about where it happened, but yeah, only recently learned that. And, he passed away long before I was born, but yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah. Did you ski at all when you were in military service?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I did my NCO training, or non-commissioned officer training, in Finnmark, which is in northern Norway. The garrison I served at is actually the world's northernmost garrison. And that was NCO training as an Arctic Ranger. So we would go out with horrible skis and sleds and heavy backpacks and just try to like be behind enemy lines. So yeah, but those skis were nothing compared to what civilians have access to.
Yeah.
You know how it is.
I do. Yeah. And I think it's toned down a little bit now, but for a while, everybody thought that anything that was mil spec, this is what the military uses, it must be awesome. Like, no, it's probably not. It's for sure the cheapest. Like that was the lowest bidder. And it was probably broken when somebody got it. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
That's Murphy's Law.
Yep.
Yeah. But it was so fun because we would have Americans come over every year and train with us.
Yeah.
Which we found really nice.
I bet you thought it was hilarious, especially if we had to get on skis.
I won't lie. That was hilarious.
That's not our forte. Yeah.
No, but you're great at other things.
Yeah. Some things. Yeah. So what does the future hold for you? What are the future expeditions that you're going to take on? I feel like you're just hitting your stride.
Yeah. So this is an addiction. Once you get bitten by the polar bug, you never really get rid of it. I think it's the same for those who learn to hunt and master it. You kind of always have the urge. Mm-hmm. So for me, I really want to do more stuff in the Arctic. It's getting increasingly hard. A lot of it has to do with logistics and expenses and the difficulty of getting in and out of areas. There's also stricter laws regarding wildlife and polar bears and stuff like that, making it even harder. But I might be working a Greenland crossing this year, if everything goes all right with the Greenlandic government. Also, but after that, we'll see. Like I have some big dreams, but it's not sure that they're possible to do.
Well, let's talk about it. What's the big dream? I'm all about finding ways to create possibilities.
Yeah, so this isn't public yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll talk about it when we quit recording. We'll make a plan for how to make it happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So we talked about expense and logistics. You've got gear, you've got equipment, you need all kinds of support, you need a rescue plan, you need a medical plan, all this stuff. And these trips are incredibly expensive. And the return on investment can be complicated because on one hand you're getting an experience, but oftentimes you need support from companies, and they need something other than your experience in order to get their return on investment.
Yes.
So, are you working with sponsors? Like who is supporting you, and how are you managing the expense of these trips?
So for me, it's been different for all the trips I've been to. Like Northwest Passage, the first stretch I co-guided, so that was kind of a job.
Yeah.
And now usually, since like I'm lucky I have all the gear I need, so for me it's just the logistics and the cost of those. Also insurance, because finding somebody willing to insure an expedition in those areas, that is really, really hard, and it keeps getting harder. But it is search and rescue, flights or logistics in and out, and insurance. Those are the main drivers of cost.
Mm-hmm.
And how you solve them would depend on where you go, because it would differ. Like in the Northwest Passage, it was like commercial airlines in and out. That was fine. For search and rescue, you would need to contact locals on a skidoo to pick you up. On Greenland, they go by helicopter usually. So it really depends.
Gotcha. So do you have any sponsors currently that are helping you?
No.
I feel like, North Face, Red Bull, companies like that should be all over you. You're doing incredible things.
Yes. So I know some expedition skiers have tried to, for instance, contact Red Bull, but, it's not as speedy and extraordinary. Like after day one, you pretty much seen what there is to see. It's just a person skiing.
Yeah.
That's usually how it goes. But yeah, Red Bull, if you're listening, I'm up for it.
Okay. All right. Well, we know people. Yeah. So as far as the clothing that you're wearing, are you wearing like a knit wool sweater that a sweet old lady in Trondheim made for you, or are you wearing something a little bit more technical?
A little bit more technical. This is a funny thing about cold weather expeditions. I'm usually freezing. Like if you see me in the city, I'll be the most wrapped up person you'll ever see, because I get cold really easily, which is kind of ironic given what my hobby is. But the more you are cold, the more you freeze. It's something about it. But I usually ski in the same clothes regardless of where I am, and that's a mesh layer in kind of technical materials, and a thin woolen layer up and down, and just the shell jacket and pants. If it's really cold, I might put on extra insulation around the bum and hips, and just like adjust with puffer vest outside the Gore-Tex jacket. But other than that, that's the standard setup, because hauling sledges, that gets really, really warm. And you like, the last thing you want to do is sweat, because if you sweat, you get cold and wet.
Yeah. If you sweat, you die.
Yeah.
I find the same thing with hunting. Like my hunting kit, whether I'm going to Texas or Australia or Alaska, is relatively similar. You know, I might add a warming layer sometimes if I'm going to be in the cold the entire time. But if you're moving around, you can pretty much wear the same kit all the time. And it's surprising. The more you do it, the less you seem to bring with you. How many calories a day are you consuming when you're doing these expeditions? Because you're working really hard.
Yeah. It also depends on how cold it is. So the colder it is, the higher you need for energy. So that's one of the things I noticed in the Northwest Passage, because I had a really, really heavy sled, and it was really, really cold. And I was like, I was inhaling food at every opportunity I got. I was hungry all the time. But how many calories? Usually, I don't know. I haven't counted, but I would guess at least 5,000 or 6,000.
Yeah, that would be my guess as well.
Yeah, as a minimum, because you start with half a bag of chips before breakfast, and you have a heavy breakfast, and then you have all the snacks during the day. And I eat like 200 grams of chocolate every day at least. And then you have like 800 calories for dinner, and then you have more snacks. So yeah, it adds up.
Besides your birthday cheesecake in Antarctica, what's one food that you have on expeditions that just lights you up and makes you happy?
Ooh, that is brown cheese on crackers with a lot.
Geitost?
Not geitost, but brown cheese. It's a really Norwegian thing, but it's kind of like
Ski Queen?
caramelized cheese.
Ski Queen.
Yeah.
Ski Queen is what we call it here. Yeah, we have it too. I think that's isn't that goat cheese? Like the brown caramelized cheese?
You can have it in a goat version, I think, but that's not the common one here.
Okay.
So it's made from, like, you know, when you make regular cheese.
Yeah.
You have the access products, the lactose or the sugar, the milk sugar. So we make the brown cheese from that.
Yeah.
It's cow, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I have some in my fridge right now. I still eat it. When I got to Norway, of course I had that, because everybody does almost every single day. And I thought that it was inedible. Like I didn't like it at all. And then like the squeezed caviar that comes in like a toothpaste tube, I was like, that is gnarly. Can't deal with it. Now I love them both. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in really, really good shape when I got to Norway, because I was wrestling at, you know, almost a professional level, and I got to wrestle on the Norwegian national team, which was awesome.
Wow.
But I was cutting weight like crazy here in the US to hit my weight level, but I was also eating American food and eating huge amounts of protein, lots and lots of beef, lots of venison. And then I got to Norway, and it was like boiled fish, boiled potatoes, and I lost weight. I couldn't believe it. I was a little bit underwhelmed by a lot of the food in Norway, but the chocolate is incredible. And Norwegians are just such special people, because when you, as a foreigner, when I met Norwegians, I was like, these people are cold, they're blocked off, they're humorless. They want nothing to do with me. Everybody here hates me. I don't know how I'm going to make it here for a year. And like after you drink with them once, or after you get to know them for a little while, then pretty soon they become friends. But that friendship lasts for so much longer. I have more friends from my 1 year in Norway than I do from all of the rest of my time in high school here in the U.S. Like those friendships are incredibly solid. So I will always love Norwegians. I will always be grateful to your country. I haven't gotten to go back since I left in 2003. I am so looking forward to an opportunity to go back at some point. But yeah, I think what you're doing is really special, and I think that you're setting such a positive example for everyone who might have that little bug in them to go be an explorer, to go be an adventurer. And it's not something that died in 1915. Like it's still very much alive. There's still parts of the world to explore, and there's ways that exploration will change you in such a meaningful way that your life will seem incomplete without it. So what advice do you have to those folks who are listening, whether they're young, middle-aged, or old, that have that exploration bug and it's an itch that they've never scratched? What would you tell folks?
Scratch it for all it's worth. It's just try go do it. And I know it's cliche, like before going to the places I've been, you read all like the heroic stories, you read all the recent stories, and you think you know what it will be like, but it's never like it. So regardless if it's an area that has been explored by hundreds, your experience will be different.
Yeah.
And so no adventure is the same. And you can go back to the same place and you'll have a complete different experience. So it's just try. And if you don't want to do it alone, find a friend, find a stranger, go on an adventure.
Where can people follow along in your adventure?
So I'm really only active on Instagram. I try to be better, but it's really sporadic. But I tend to try answer messages. It's Marthe. What's those lying
underscore
lines called? Underscore?
Yeah.
Bre, and that's just an abbreviation of my last name, really. But I also really love glaciers, and Bre is glacier in Norwegian, so that kind of just
And for everybody out there who doesn't understand, I'm going to have an Instagram post that's featuring Marthe when this podcast comes out. And there's also going to be a link to her Instagram in the podcast description that you can click on. And I promise you, if you look at this, you're going to see little pictures and videos that are just incomprehensibly rad. So encourage folks to check that out. Marthe, thank you so much for your time. And I'm so looking forward to seeing the crazy adventures that you get up to next.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of their busy lives to write a review for the show and share it with their friends. I'm extremely proud of how intelligent, engaged, and adventurous this audience is. Original music for the Six Ranch podcast is written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Harlander. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.